everybody. This is John Yeager with Cast Matters. Welcome back to our series on family offices. We're on episode 3. Today, we're going to talk about the current trends and big issues facing the industry. I've got the same cast of characters that we had in the first two. Ryan Kerry from Knowledger, Alejandro Nazario from TOS, Sue McDermott from Addepar, and Kristen Keith from Sage. So welcome everybody to the podcast again and look forward to this discussion. All right, so our first issue we're going to talk about is in the trends space is the trend of insourcing versus outsourcing of services. So Ryan, I'm going to kick it over to you. What's your current thinking? What are you seeing a lot? You guys obviously work with lots of different firms and lots of different clients. What are you guys seeing from this aspect of the business?
Sure. Thanks, John. The trend I'm seeing is the hybrid of insourcing and outsourcing. So my previous company, I was an outsourcing firm. So I'm very pro outsourcing, be it operational or development, whatever it may be. But back then it was kind of an all or none situation or mentality. Like you're going to outsource and whoever you're outsourcing is going to do it all. Still exist. But a trend that I'm seeing is the hybrid. And there's one of our clients that really, I think, has it dialed in, and they are very specific. They like to outsource 80% and keep 20% in-house. And they measure that by how much effort they think both sides are doing. And they're keeping their internal staff on the same projects, tasks that the outsourcing are working on, but it's more of a management perspective. The in-house people are managing the outsourced staff. And I think that model has worked very well for them. I'm seeing variations of it, but what I really like about that one is how they keep track of it very accurately, and they like to keep that ratio of 80-20. Curious, Sue, what are your thoughts on this insourcing, outsourcing?
I think, outsourcing has always been a big topic in the family office, at least in the 25 years that I've been working with family offices. I think in the beginning of my career, it was very privacy based, right? There was a resistance to outsourcing because of a loss of control and privacy. I do think the evolution of technology has aided a trend in a greater acceptance to outsourcing. To your point, Ryan, I think the hybrid is something that is possible now that wasn't as possible 20 or 25 years ago because of technology advancements. And it's given family offices an opportunity to look at their operation and be more thoughtful from an efficiency and maybe even cost perspective without conceding on privacy.
And the technology sure has helped that privacy part too.
Ryan, I was going to ask you to clarify. So on the model you were talking about, the 80-20, so it sounded like it was less function and it was more sharing the load across the functions. So sometimes when I think about the hybrid model, it's like, okay, we're gonna outsource the transactional piece, we're gonna keep the controller piece, or we're gonna outsource controller piece and keep the transactional piece. Are you seeing it more kind of again, kind of effort? It sounds like you're saying more effort related than it was more functional related. Did I interpret that right?
Yeah, I agree. And they're outsourcing what I always pick on bill pay and payroll because they're kind of I don't know, John, if you agree, because this is your world, they're kind of the low bottom of the rung from a skill perspective. And I see that being outsourced more than everything. The other thing I see is people or families specifically used to always say, we're unique, we're complex. You still see it every once in a while when people say that. But I think outsourcing that is almost an advantage because then wherever you're going to outsource it is going to clean it up and make it a procedure versus tends to be if it's in-house and it's really complex, you have really smart people winging it for the last decade or so, which is a bad situation in my opinion.
Yeah.
I don't know that I see it as much from the feature and function the way that you're talking about it. We see a fair amount of family offices are typically smaller businesses, right? So they want to retain, again, decision making and control, but maybe looking to outsource for two reasons. A, they keep their staff small and they don't really want to, hire full-time employees to deal with data migration, ingress, egress, recon, operations, right there. Yes, they want analysts and reporting and decision making. So I see it as a willingness or a desire to alleviate themselves of a burden that they don't want at the heavy lifting level, so that many are a little top heavy, right? They retain senior professionals only and outsource some of the middle and lower professional activities.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to hit on here is when you outsource, keeping your outsource partner doing exactly what you want. So let's say I'm not going to pick on Addepar or Sage in this situation, considering our audience. It's, if you're outsourcing, have it define how accurate you want it to be. And this is something I think we're going to hit on a little later. To get it absolutely perfect, and if you want it to be perfect, great, that's your demand. Just realize it's going to cost you more. And I always warn people, are you paying your outsourcing firm on a fixed fee over a process, or are you paying them hourly? And you can get in trouble if you want it perfect in your outsourcing in an hourly arrangement.
I think that's an excellent point. And Alejandro, I know you have some kind of practical experience in that, but it's part of the trend, right? In that I think the evolution is that they're open to that dialogue and talking about how do we achieve efficiency and the level of results or quality that we want, and what's the price, whether that's dollars or time or something else.
Yeah, we tend to see good success when you in-house, we'll consider a generalist, and you outsource a specialist. Because if you in-house too many specialists, you're going to have a lot of slack in the office where you have at some point nothing for that person to do, and that might be expensive headcount in-house. And so if you have a family office professional, which tends to come at a premium in terms of human capital, they tend to be more strategic. They probably have a very broad background. If they're in a family office, they might have some exposure to tax, to legal, to investment and wealth planning. Having more of those people in-house overseeing an external vendor that's only doing one thing, especially when you can modulate that thing up, that project or that team up or down. And especially if you've got hourly rates, like you said, Ryan, we do like that shift where you can control your specialty costs, because it's not always going to be that you need that type of service.
One of the things that we see when we help our family office clients outsource is we do typically find that they definitely want to outsource the closing the books, the controllership level, oversee of the process, those kind of things, because that's generally where they're lacking. They may not have that accounting expertise. A lot of family offices may have investment expertise and domain expertise around that, and then they have somebody that can pay the bills and process AP. So a lot of times they're missing that core component of let's get the financials right, let's get them done, let's get them timely closed, and those type of things. And so we tend to spend a lot of time in there, and then sometimes they'll want us to extend into the transaction. A lot of times they want us to send in the transaction side. We still need somebody at the client that can answer questions, that can chase down documents, that can kind of herd the cats, so to speak. And that's always helpful. But the other side of that is then you're freeing up hopefully some capacity to use the information to allow them to make better decisions, to manage capital and those type of things. So that's generally how we've tended to see it. Kristen, I don't. What do you?
Yeah.
What about from your standpoint? What do you see?
It's funny because it's a little bit of the opposite. And that's because the people that I'm talking to are people who are interested in bringing accounting in-house. And usually I feel like family offices are starting in a hybrid model of sorts because they can only have so many headcount. And these folks are generalists, to Alejandro's point, right? They're wearing multiple hats. So it's where are we going to get these specialists to help us? And oftentimes it starts with accounting. And oftentimes the outsourced teams that they are leveraging are really doing the basics for them. But family offices are not, their accounting and the way they manage their books is not like a normal business. And so I think as, time passes and they see areas for improvement, it's, what, we like what they're doing, but we think we can do X, Y, and Z a little bit better. And they slowly start to get more involved. And as they scale and as they grow, they decide, let's bring that in-house. And I see that in other areas too. I mean, you look at investing and there's definitely a partnership model where, they do a mix of direct investing and co-investing and outside funds. And, they're leveraging outside experts to, help them with due diligence, given that they have a small team. But at some point, they may want to hire one of those people and bring them in-house. And it just happens, as the family office is scaling and growing. So there's a lot of different departments and areas, and it's really, what do they care about? What is their passion? What's driving this family office that usually dictates which areas they are outsourcing and insourcing and how quickly they're scaling.
Absolutely.
I think another key point that we haven't really touched on yet is their access and availability to quality talent. Excuse me. Depending on where they're located, the culture of their business, the size of their business, the level of professional that they're looking for in some of the activities that we just talked about are often people that are on the move in their career, right? There might be mid-career and they're looking to, expand and go to new endeavors. And so there's a balance here of not only, what do they want to retain in-house, but what's practically feasible based on the talent pool.
Absolutely. I mean, as a CPA firm, we fight the battle of employee acquisition and retention, daily. We
Absolutely.
have a full-time staffed recruiting department, right? Because it's harder and harder, as we all know, to find good talent. The other side, and Alejandro, I'd like your input here, is the other fractional kind of outsourcing piece that we haven't talked about is system management. So we're now with Sage ERP, Sage Intacct ERP. We're with Addepar, which is a complicated, kind of robust investment reporting portfolio management system. And so as you're moving into these areas, as your system's more complex, do you have the resources to be investments, accounting and finance, system expertise? Do you have all this stuff in house? And that's created, I know, some opportunities for us on the Sage Intacct side. But Alejandro, I know it's also something you guys have run across.
Yeah, the architecture of the systems working together is really important. And like you said, most people have a bias towards investment or accounting or something else, and they might have exposure to other fields, but they might have a preference or more experience in one. And part of why this trend of outsourcing is persistent is, and it's interesting, Kristen, I would say that's the exception that a family office is quote unquote scaling. I think the common rule is that it's probably not scaling in the traditional sense. The family might not even want that outcome. And so it's almost like you're going to have this persistent headwind that you can't really scale in the traditional sense. You're going to be stuck with what you've got. That's just what it is. Most families see the family office as a cost center. And what that means is you have to be as efficient as possible for every dollar that you're given in-house. And that's where you start to see this kind of healthy balance of a little bit of in-house, a little bit of outsource. But as it comes to the systems architecture, you have to be able to see in the future a little bit of where we're trying to go. You have to spend a little bit of time up front thinking about what is the roadmap? Why do we even have a family office? That's a really important question that's just not asked enough. Why do we have this family office in the first place? And what are we trying to accomplish? What do we want to measure? And that can inform a lot of the decisions, a lot of the tools that you might bring together. Addepar, Sage, and Knowledge are working together is for a very specific type of office. And while there are a lot of family offices that want that system or that integration, it might not be a good fit for everyone who's only focused on one side or the other. And so being very intentional and saying, we're going down this path for this specific reason can then inform, okay, these are the tools that we're probably going to have to build or buy. And if you know roughly what you're trying to solve for, you can reverse engineer from there and say, this is our first step. But what we see more common most often is really the, building from scratch or reinventing the wheel approach. And that's where people get stuck because they take on a new system. They say, this is what I was told to buy. They start to adopt it. They don't know how to move forward and they get stuck. And next thing you know, you're tied to a long-term contract and you can't necessarily get out. And now you've overpaid for a tool that you're not actually using. So there are lots of, opportunities for a failure, but thinking about where you're trying to go in the first place, it's a little bit of a cliche, but having that roadmap for the family office. You see roadmaps for businesses often, but you don't see a roadmap for the family office often enough.
And I think on the technology side, John, if you think about sort of modernization or recent evolution, I'm going to go back to something Alejandro said, right? Sort of outsourcing specialty work. The care and feeding of a technology platform has become one of those specialties that family offices often can succeed well if they outsource that. To all the points that Alejandro made, someone whose job it is to stay abreast of technology trends and roadmaps and how do we take advantage of the new things that are coming out for you. Most family office professionals don't have the bandwidth or the experience to consider and incorporate all those things.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts on the kind of the in-source outsource model here? If not, let's talk about the next topic, which is it was mentioned earlier, but this kind of managing expectations, over engineering trend that we sometimes see in the marketplace. Alejandro, I know you've spoken this at length before, but what is your initial take when you're dealing with clients in terms of, kind of the I'll call it the final mile, right? The last mile that we talk about in technology, to getting from that 99% to 100%, and managing expectations and the cost versus the value and those type of things. What are you seeing out there?
Well, aiming for 100% accuracy is always the goal, but I think it's worth talking about the effort and cost to get to 100%, and if it's going to matter enough to justify the cost. So it's a delicate balance here because you always want to look at your data and say, this is clean, this is correct. You always want to say that when I have a report, every single data point is what it needs to be. But the reality is that the data requires maintenance, it requires attention, and there's a cost to doing that over time. And if you look at the information that you have and you say, what this is intended for is general guidance on, are we in compliance with some, guidelines for our portfolio management? We'd call that something like that. This is directional information. And then it would be probably worthwhile to consider spending your effort to get to very close, but you don't have to spend that extra dollar to get to 100%. Relative to someone who's going to use these things to submit filings for a regulatory body or tax purposes, there might be a higher burden. You do need to spend those dollars, and it's recognizing that and then investing the time and effort to get this data as clean as it possibly could be. So what we tell our teams is help us understand, why do you have this tool in the first place? Just always ask that question. Ask, what is the purpose of the data that you're going to be using? What types of decisions are you making? And then you can solve for how much effort should we invest in terms of getting this data to 100. And it's certainly achievable, but it will be, the cost will accelerate as you get closer to 100%.
Brian, what about you?
Very similar to this, a good analogy might be how you've seen it, John, with the clients we work together with, and everybody else has too. When you're using a best of breed solution, and I'm going to pick on Sage here, Addepar is for the securities for performance. And when you move it over to Sage, we have a lot of families come in and they want every single little detail to go over in Sage. And we're like, we highly recommend that Is it possible? Yes. And the line we draw is you probably don't want all your marketable securities tracked individually over in Sage. That can really create a lot of work. Back to Alejandro's, where's the appropriate effort? You're creating more work on Sage. Put asset class over there, track it by custodian and account. Great, that's what dimensions are for. Don't put all the securities in. So that's a good analogy how to set these best of breed systems up to fit your need. You're getting all the information accurately, and it works a lot better that way. And when you think security, go to Addepar.
I think there has to be a balance found between systems and manual effort, right? And the perfectionism is the enemy in this, this scenario. These systems are they going to get you 100% of the way to perfection? No, they're not. People have to make these systems work at the end of the day. They can automate a significant amount of these processes, but you have to define, okay, where is the ROI for us, and what are we expecting out of these systems? What are we expecting them to do for us? And where are we willing to spend our manual efforts? Oftentimes if I can save you 40% of the time you're doing on X, Y, and Z, that's going to allow you to analyze, your investments more, right? Or make more investments or focus your time elsewhere. So I think, again, honing back in and kind of wrangling expectations to an extent is important, because at the end of the day, they'll realize, wow, okay, this is still a lot more efficient, but striving for perfection is, to Sue's point, that's the enemy here.
I do think that dialogue has the trend or trajectory of that discussion has changed over the last 5 years, though, Ryan, right? It used to be, it was, those of us dealing with the practical problems of attempting to do that, we're having that conversation all the time and trying to convince clients of it. I feel in recent year or two, I don't have to do as much convincing. I still have to talk about the details, but they've come along to, yes, we agree with that philosophy. Now let's talk about how that works. So I do think it's headed in the right direction. And again, technology has helped that.
Well, if we're talking about that, it's kind of a natural segue. Part of the issue you have is you have this diversity of data sources, right? Because you're getting data from all different places. You got your data architecture issues, data aggregation, all those type of things that can create this over engineering type of environment. So Alejandro, I know you guys obviously deal with this a lot. Do you want to kind of weigh in here?
Yeah, so thinking about the approaching the perfection, right? If you think about the different types of technologies that exist today that weren't around 10 or 15 years ago, you'll find that there's a wide variety of technologies that are optimized to gather a certain type of data. So as you're building this roadmap with your family office and you're starting to consider what tools should we leverage, consider the data sources. And so where's this number going to come from? Oftentimes one tool, pick on Addepar in this case, is exceptional at, gathering a certain type of information, and they might require a third-party integration for other types of information in general terms. And so understanding that one tool it's going to get you a long way, but it might not get you all the way there, and kind of taking an inventory of what tools you might need to complete the picture is really important. We have some prospective clients that have massive art collections, and gathering data from an art collection can be difficult if there's no readily available information. And so if you take as a given now that, and this is just a relatively recent integration, there's an art, we'll say data company that can now be integrated with Addepar, and exploring that relationship and then exploring the expectations for each component as it relates to the system, and then measuring, okay, this system is working well against its own benchmark versus another system which has a different benchmark given the data types and the frequency of the data updates and so forth. Private capital compared to marketable, so you're going to have a different cadence of information. Artwork certainly going to be even less than that, real estate and so forth. And so measuring the information types, figuring out what's a benchmark for the data quality and the frequency of updates, and then measuring, okay, this data source is, working well for this component, and then moving on from there.
It's interesting, if you go back in time on the family office side, nobody used to ever know what a family office was. They were all secret. There was maybe that many of them. They kind of did their things their own way. And so there were fewer options from a technology standpoint just because there was not a market there, so to speak. But I think one of the benefits of the trends of the family office being a much more popular concept, a lot more openness around what people are doing, those kind of things, is the creation of tools. Addepar certainly been around a while, Sage has been around a while, but the things you guys are doing from an integration with third parties, with Ryan coming to the table with his tool to integrate the two, for the tool that Alejandro has talked about with the art. I mean, who would have thought about that 5 years ago? But there's obviously a demand for that now, because of the increase in volume, increase in popularity, increase of knowledge of what's going on in the family office. Is that, you guys agree with that, or am I seeing that wrong?
Well, the perspective that we have is that as the technology catches up, people are saying it's now possible to complete my portfolio, to get more data flows or data feeds for my portfolio. And it was just an assumption back even 10 years ago that I'm going to get my stocks and bonds, I'm going to get my cash, and the rest I'm going to do it in Excel. But as you have new technologies coming out and you have the ability to link those technologies one to another, now it's opening this up possibility to get your whole portfolio or your whole picture in one or a few different tools, assuming that you can have successful integrations and successful maintenance of those integrations. But this is where it is becoming a new world in terms of what is possible. And so family offices are now redoing their expectations, and they're saying, we can now focus on other assets that before were completely offline, they were completely manual, we can get those connected.
So we're starting to move into technology discussions and what's going on from the technology standpoint, which is really kind of our next episode. So I think this is a good jumping off place for wrapping this episode up. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to kind of throw into this episode at the end?
I
Go ahead,
think,
Kristen.
as a nice transition, family offices have not been known for being at the forefront of technology, right? That's starting to change. And I kind of see this similarly to when the iPhone rolled out and everyone was like, oh, I don't want this device, a little computer. No, this isn't going to work for me. Hold on. And people were afraid of change. And then all of a sudden it was, hold on, I can work from anywhere now. I can answer an email or be on a call or be really efficient from the subway, right? Wherever you're traveling. And it just made it more efficient and more convenient for people. And I think the rise of the technology we're seeing with family office trends, even the adoption of AI and machine learning and the ability to process mass amounts of data is giving these family offices insights that they haven't had before. So they're starting to adopt it. We're kind of on the precipice here of this massive growth of tech trends. So look forward to discussing that further.
Awesome. All right. Well, again, thank you all for participating in this roundtable, talking about the trends and big issues facing the family office industry. We look forward to the next episode where we'll be talking about the evolution of technology. So please keep a watch out for that, and everybody have a great day. Thank you.